Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm eating some oatmeal here. We're kind of having meal time. And when you have an 8-hour meeting, you know what? It's okay to eat and it's okay to take a break and all that good stuff. So feel free to come and go. Um, Normally, I wouldn't do this, but I'm going to screen share and share an email that I'm composing in the process of composing it. And the reason I say normally I wouldn't do that is because, that's normally kind of a private thing. You're composing an email to someone. But here's the thing, we've reached such a point of urgency in terms of planetary overheating that we cannot afford to stay quiet about this any longer. And those of us who can do something about this but aren't are the moral equivalent of the police officer kneeling on the neck of Mr. George Floyd, right? Why? Because we could get up and stand up and let Mr. Floyd live, but we choose not to. And the reason I say it's morally equivalent is because we could get up and work together to make this SRM thing happen so that we cool the planet and actually live, all of us. But no, we're going to continue, kneeling on the neck of complex life on Earth, kneeling on the neck of Mother Earth herself, right? Because every moment that we don't get up and stand up and come together and work together to make planetary cooling happen in time so that we can all live and all of life on Earth can live, every moment that we don't get up and stand up to do that, we're continuing to press our own knee against the neck of Mother Earth. Okay, enough of that. Please jump in, everyone. I'm going to screen share and show this email that I'm in the process of composing. Let's go ahead and get a start at what's at the bottom of this, which is Dr. Yatow at Harvard responds to an email from Professor David Keith at Harvard, who is the applied physicist who is funded by Bill Gates to do SRM research. And the specific facet of the SRM research that he's engaged in is precisely spraying stuff into the atmosphere, whether it's for cloud seeding or reflective particles or whatever. That's the bottom line. And just to put that into some context, let me put that into some context. There's basically 6 major ways that you can do SRM. And Emery, would you be good enough to mute? We're getting a little bit of feedback. No big deal, but always good. Anyway, and just unmute anytime. I really want to make this a conversation, particularly when I'm screen sharing. So just jump in. This is the perfect size meeting for that. But anyway, the six basic ways that you can do SRM. One is Yatow's solution, putting mirrors, vast clusters of mirrors over portions of the ocean, right? Called mirror reflection. A second, which is the closest to that, is one I came up with, which is putting essentially giant oil booms around. The simplest way to think about it is one giant oil boom, circular oil boom, surrounding the Arctic ice. And we could deploy that immediately. We need to deploy it immediately. And then within the bounds of that oil boom, let's say that there's the area that encloses in terms of dark blue ocean seawater is roughly equivalent to the extent of early summer Arctic sea ice. So millions of square miles of the stuff. And imagine then that within that giant circular oil boom, within which you basically got the Arctic ice and an equivalent area of dark blue ocean seawater, okay? So imagine that in the area of the seawater contained by the oil boom, right? And yes, we'd have appropriate management of openings in the boom to let schools of fish who have to swim right near the surface, or birds or whatever, we'll mitigate as best we can. There's no question, some folks are going to get impacted, some brother and sister species and ecosystems. There's no question. But the question is, do we put out the fire or not? Anyway, I'm going to stop going off on tangents and simply state that within that circular oil boom, in the air on top of the area of dark blue ocean seawater, which is the equivalent in area of the existing Arctic sea ice, we distribute, I don't even know how many trillions or quadrillions, or I'm not even going to try to estimate the number. It'd be an interesting exercise to do so, but, and a simple one actually. I simply haven't sat down with pencil and paper to do it. But cover that whole area with an appropriate number of floating golf ball sized spheres made of bright white reflective silica, the same material as the silica powder used by the ICE 911 folks, which gets to the next solution. So I'm going to call mine colorfully the oil boom golf ball solution for refreezing the Arctic, for cooling the Arctic, right? And it would have immediate impact. It would reflect away sunlight that's currently landing on the dark blue Arctic Ocean water, melting the ice. We get to refreeze the Arctic. That's huge. Okay, so again, making a summary of the solutions, we've got the Yatao mirror reflection solution, mirrors on ocean. A derivative of that, which is the oil boom golf ball solution. Next is the ICE 911 solution, where we dump a bunch of this, a thin layer of the silica powder on top of the surface of the ice to reflect sunlight away from it. Well, wait a second, isn't ice already reflective? Yes, it is, but this stuff is even more reflective, is the bottom line. Anyway, it's a very elegant solution. So that's the third, ICE 911, silica powder. A fourth is putting large-scale canopies in select regions of desert of the world to reflect sunlight back to space from the desert. So that's fourth. Fifth would be urban areas, right? Rooftops, roads, you know, just increasing the reflectivity of cities, basically, and highways and whatever else that's built out. And then the sixth is the Dr. Keith solution of spraying a bunch of shit into the atmosphere. And I think you can see my prejudice. I think that's the dumbest idea of all. I think the other five are frankly good solutions, and they all need to be deployed. We simply need to find the right mix. But you know what? If there's a component of it that involves spraying stuff into the atmosphere, okay, whatever. But the bottom line is we've got to cool Mother Earth. And quite frankly, it matters to me a hell of a lot less how we do that than that we do that, right? You can imagine, the house is on fire, kids are in the attic. There's probably a very elegant way, right, to put out the fires and save everybody's lives in such a way that we don't damage any of the house. But you know what? We don't have time to figure that out. Break out the big hoses, you know, break the windows and douse the damn fire and get up into the attic and get those kids out, use ladders, use those things they need to jump into that a bunch of, you know, firefighters hold, et cetera, et cetera. But put out the fire. In other words, I don't care how you do it, but fucking do it. You know what I'm saying? And what is happening in this correspondence between two Harvard scientists, take note, okay? Here you have two Harvard scientists who are working on two totally different solutions. The first one of the six that I mentioned, mirror reflection, Yatao, and the last of the six that I mentioned, spraying a bunch of stuff into the atmosphere. They're working on two, you know, essentially polar opposite kinds of SRM solutions. But what they have in common is that they're both SRM. They're both about increasing the reflectivity of Mother Earth and cooling the planet that way, all right? And, you know, the obvious thing that needs to happen is that these two Harvard scientists need to agree to collaborate with, you know, me, who came up with the golf ball oil boom solution, with the ICE 911 folks who came up with the ICE 911 solution, with me, who came up with the desert canopy solution, and with, the obvious solution of increasing reflectivity of roofs in urban areas. That's the solution number 5. Representatives from all 6 of these solution areas need to come together with great urgency to figure out what I'm in the process of proposing that we figure out. And that'll get us to the email that I'm working on. So let's go back to that and just jump in. Don't raise your hand or anything, because I probably won't even be able to see it because I'm screen sharing. But anyway, so here's the email thread. So Professor Keith copies one of his colleagues and says, here's a short video about what Ye is doing, which we're all familiar with. I'd be interested to learn a bit more. I am skeptical that surface-based mirrors make environmental sense. It seems very likely they will end up having more environmental impact per unit benefit than other options, like spraying shit into the atmosphere. This does not apply for local cooling of cities to reduce HVAC loads. Oh, well, thank you for blessing that Professor Keith. But he just summarily kind of dismisses surface-based SRM. Let me know if there's anything else written, blah, blah, blah. He might tweet about it, to other local reflective solar geo ideas, about which I'm similarly skeptical. Okay, it's fine to be skeptical, but what we need is to get together. Now, David Keith, it's interesting. He's also the founder of Carbon Engineering. So he's got a dog in that fight as well. I imagine he's making quite a bit of money at that. And so Ye responds very politely, "Thank you for reaching out and noting the importance of assessing environmental impacts." Well, duh, we need to assess that. But we also need to put out the fire, right? I mean, here's the thing. What Dr. Keith is doing is the moral equivalent of a fire chief, right? Standing out in front of a blazing fire, kids are in the attic, house is in flames, and he's standing there smoking a cigarette, and some of the firefighters say, "Chief, can we go ahead and put out this fire?" And he's standing there smoking a cigarette, and he's saying, "Well, you know what? I'm really worried about breaking the windows and getting the mattress wet," right? Mr. Johnson's a friend of mine, and I'd really feel terrible about, the environmental impacts, right, of spraying in all that water to put out the fire. And we say, "Okay, Chief, well, you got any other brilliant ideas? Because it'd be kind of nice if we got the kids out of there and put out this fire." He's like, "Well, let me know if there's anything else written on the subject." Dude, we're all about to die. The kids are about to die. House is going up in flames. It's time to freaking put out the fire. So if not, mere reflection, then what? What do you got? The fundamental point is the point I'll make both in the video and in the email that I'm composing. But first, let me finish reading what we got here. And Uncle Frank, I'm so glad you're here. Uncle Frank is a world-class physicist whose work has been a part of 2 different Nobel Prizes. Anyway, more on Uncle Frank later. But thank you for helping to publicize the Flash Talk and voicing your concerns. Local and global ecosystem impact are things we care deeply about. Well, duh, we all care about. They are the current focal point of our investigations and the reason why we have not yet published our results. Well, that's great. Let's not publish results. Let's not talk about what we need to do until we're like 100% sure. Listen, by the time we're 100% sure, we're going to be 100% fried to a crisp. That's the only problem of waiting until we're 100% sure about anything. Our group specializes in material science and complex system engineering. Our understanding is that proper material choice, mechanical engineering, and fabrication can enable durable surface-based albedo infrastructure that has advantage compared to atmosphere-based methods. It's Dr. Keith's methods that are atmosphere-based. So they're competing basically. In principle, we are working towards real-time tunability, a high degree of spatial tunability, modularity, multi-use, economy of delivery, and most important of all, an ability to catalyze transition to solar energy. You are the expert on why wind wouldn't work as well. So, basically they're trying to solve multiple things at once, but they're trying to work it out in email, which we just don't have time for this crap anymore. We've got to get together and work this out. Anyway, that's the thrust of what I'm writing about and what I'll share in my video that I've recorded this morning. I trust you would agree that alleviating the termination shock risk of solar radiation management family of approaches is as essential as the ability to slow down / stall the temperature overshoot. A coherent exit strategy from a fossil fuel economy is another guiding criterion of our work. And concentrating solar thermal energy provides a route within the mirror reflection framework. Anyway, Ye is basically just trying to give a nutshell overview of why his solution is good from various angles. That's great, but what we need to do is really get together and work this out holistically, and that gets to my proposal. So I took that email that Ye had forwarded on, in which there's a few folks at Harvard on the thread, and I forwarded it on to Guy, Pauline, and Ye, and I'll just read. Here's a message I just recorded for the three of you, building off of the email thread below. Thank you, Ye, for sending that on. I trust I'm in line sharing with the four of us. Please consider the proposal I make here therein, basically that we organize a meeting among all relevant SRM folks who should be there, starting with the four of us, Professor Keith, one or two folks from ice911.org, and any others who make sense, seeking to not make the meeting too big, etc. To basically start with 2 big bullet points. Let's start with what we all agree to. SRM, period. For all the reasons Guy will present next, the problem, followed by Ye providing a neutral as possible relative to possible solutions, science/engineering overview of SRM, the solution. In other words, Ye, don't tip the scales in your favor here or in favor of mirror reflection or against Professor Keith's solution or against my solutions or anything like that. Let's just get together and have just a presentation about SRM, period, as a whole, right? Next, let's agree to an Uber strategy for achieving the goal. I'm going to say the obvious. I'm going to say the obvious but seldom discussed, right? The obvious but seldom discussed, and its absence from discussion is worthy of a discussion itself, of its own discussion. I mean, I'm basically saying, listen, we got to talk about this. This is a freaking, emperor's new clothes moment. All right, we're all walking around naked, pretending that we're smart, when we're being the biggest idiots in the freaking universe for not coming together and saying, hey, let's talk about this. So that's the point of the second bullet. Next, let's agree to an Uber strategy for achieving the obvious but seldom discussed. I'm going to put but never discussed. Let's face it, these guys aren't discussing it. The obvious but never discussed, and its absence from discussion is worthy of its own discussion, goal of getting the appropriate mix of SRM solutions deployed at scale in time, right? One tiny example of a possible Uber strategy, and I am not at all attached to this one or any other, this is just an example, could be A, we initiate 2 major initiatives, A and B, where A is getting our own internal house in order in terms of doing the holistic global modeling required to basically find the right mix and magnitude of the doses of the various specific SRM solutions we will need. That's the most neutral answer I can come up with that I think would satisfy everyone, right? Let's be objective about it. Let's model it, and let's find the right mix. Let's not go into the discussion presupposing that we have the right mix. Let's actually do the hard work of finding the right mix, right? And I'm reminded of the words of the leader of the Apollo 13 mission back in Houston, the very senior NASA, you know, officer or commander or general or whatever, who was, you know, sitting in the equivalent of the Captain Kirk seat in the room. You know, we've all seen the movies or documentaries of Apollo 13 where the astronauts almost died. And he said to everyone in the room at the very beginning, he said, let's work the problem. Let's not make it worse by guessing. Basically, do the hard work, do the math, figure it out. Don't guess, right? And I think I was just a toddler when all that was happening. Uncle Frank, you were very much dialed into all that, I'm sure. But the world was at the edge of its seat. Emery, you're a couple years older than me. You were probably pretty tuned into that. And here we are in a similar situation, except instead of a handful of astronauts, it's all of complex life that's in the balance. And I'm saying to all of us, to Dr. Ye Tao, to Professor Guy McPherson, to Professor David Keith at Harvard, to the ICE 9/11 folks centered around Stanford and the Silicon Valley, and to myself, you know, Jamin Shively, and to all of us, it's time for the conversation. It's time for the conversation about working the problem and finding the right mix of solutions. The right mix of SRM solutions, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Once we've found the right mix of SRM solutions, let's say we do that and we find the right mix, right? And it's 40% mirror reflection, you know, 12% oil boom and golf balls, you know, 17% ICE 9/11, 18% desert canopies, 6% urban, and whatever the balance is, Professor Keith spraying stuff into the atmosphere. Let's say we've done the hard work of analysis and modeling, and we found the right mix. That's just, that right mix is just the tip of the iceberg, because then what do we need to do? We need to sell it to the world, right? And I think the moment to get the world's attention about all this is not after we've come up with the optimal mix. I think the moment to get the world's attention on all this is right now. And I discussed this further in the email, so let me get back to the email. I hope this is interesting to you all. All right. So we got to find the right mix and magnitude. And then B, completely separate from A, we create a planetary, what? A mission, a movement, a community? Let's put the naming topic in the parking lot and simply call it a planetary mission for starters, with an agreement to change the name later. Okay, I don't want to get hung up on the name. Because if I say, oh, global movement, well, movements always failed historically. You know, I mean, come on. I want to take whoever would say that, and I want to do that which I cannot mention, period. Holy shit. I don't give a shit what it's called, but humanity needs to get together and do this, right? Anyway, but for the moment, we're going to call it a planetary mission to basically sell the world on the treatment it needs for the most urgent of its problems, planetary overheating. What's the solution? SRM. Now, in fact, let me change the font on that just for fun. The solution, SRM, right? Now, there are a lot of ways of doing SRM, and we within A are modeling, analyzing, and ultimately designing the best of these. And that conversation is far less urgent than the B conversation, which is this headline: world needs massive dose of SRM to cool and survive. Subtext, how? Lots of possible ways. Scientists at Harvard are working on those. More news at 11. You know, who gives a shit about how? That's like saying, well, if we spray water at the house, we'll break windows and get the mattress wet. dude, the mattress is going to be non-existent in 5 minutes if we don't freaking get it wet. All right. So anyway, that's it in a nutshell. Looking forward to seeing you all soon with love and passion and all that love and passion that all life matters. So much to me that I'm not going to let this go. Jamin, P.S. Please feel free to join us now on the Solution Club, where we will be discussing all this. Well, it'll be 7 hours by the time I send this email. Let me stop sharing for a moment. I'm going to stop sharing. And let's, well, that's basically what we're doing. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm not going to talk with anyone else. I'm just going to, do my own thing, publish my papers and do my podcast. And yeah, holy shit, kindergartners. If we can't make it out of kindergarten, we're not going to make it home today. Right? There was that movie Escape from New York in like the early 80s. We need escape from kindergarten. We need to learn how to freaking break out of kindergarten here. Okay. So now I'm going to play a video where I'm slightly more polite and composed. Here, let me find it, and then I'll do the screen share. All right. How's everybody doing? Okay, awesome. So let's take a look at this video that I recorded for Guy, Pauline, and Yay. It goes for a little over 5 minutes. So fasten your seatbelts. Guy, Pauline, and Yay. Yay, thank you so much for copying me on the email thread, which I'm forwarding along with this video. And I have some thoughts about what David Keith is saying, so I'll just put those on the table first. He says, I'm skeptical that surface-based mirrors make environmental sense. It seems very likely they will end up having more environmental impact per unit benefit than other options. And what, let me know if there's anything else written, I'd be interested to learn a bit more, whatever. I mean, he's being standoffish. What needs to happen is a conversation between Professor Keith and Yay, right? And I would say that more broadly, what we really urgently need is to have a conversation between the four of us, Professor Keith, the ICE 9/11 folks, and any other significant players in this space who we think we might want to invite. I really loved the team we put together last year, and I think we should continue to do that. What I'm offering is let's go ahead and put together a proposal for a meeting, send it out to all these folks. Whoever accepts, accepts. Whoever doesn't accept, I bet you they'll probably watch the video, which we can send them after we have the meeting. And the basic point of it is, look, we're doing Mother Earth, humanity, and all of life on Earth a huge disservice by delaying the inevitable conversation, which basically goes like this. We need to cool the planet. SRM is the only way. We basically got 5 major options on the table, 6 if you include urban, but I see urban as more like an on-ramp to this whole thing. So it's an important part. So 6 with urban. You got the big guns of, Yay, your solution, that's the preeminent one. We've got to cool the planet by breaking out the big guns of millions of square miles of reflectivity deployed on the oceans. ICE 9/11 is very important for preserving existing ice, the golf ball size, hollow, spherical, silica spheres, floating spheres, contained by oil booms surrounding the Arctic is, I think, a super cool way, pardon the pun, to refreeze the Arctic, to cool the Arctic waters there. And then, of course, we've got desert reflectivity, as we've talked about, with the obvious disadvantages. And then we've got, Dr. Keith's and Bill Gates spraying shit into the atmosphere. I think and then number 6 is, the urban. So I think it's fairly obvious that we're going to need some sort of mix, dare I say optimal mix. There's got to be an optimal mix out there. But if we can't get past the level of being standoffish relative to each other and saying, well, let me first read what you got and then I'll think about it for a few months and see what holes I can poke in it. Look, at some point we have to get over it. You know, at boy meets girl, at some point the two have to kiss. Humanity kissing is humanity in conversation about this, where we bring together the aforementioned. Look, Guy, you're the #1 leading expert in the world on the diagnosis of the problem. So we need you at the table. Yay, you're the #1 leading expert in the solution to the problem. And then, you know, you've got the rest of us who play important parts, who play important roles, right? And then there are other experts. I'm sure Dr. Keith has a lot to bring to the table. Among other things, he's got Bill Gates to bring to the table. And Bill Gates has a lot of friends with a lot of money. So if we can come together as a united front and commit to figuring this thing out holistically, right? And then say, listen, world, the headline is we need SRM. Of course, there's analysis and heaven forbid disagreement between the different approaches. We're working together to find the optimal mix, and we're doing global holistic modeling that doesn't just model heat, models a bunch of things, acidity and concentration of myriad gases and whatnot. Because ultimately, and we need to find a holistic solution to everything. I'm in total agreement. Let's start with SRM. I've got a lot more to say about a lot of other topics. I've got to kick off the Solution Club now. You're all invited, so please come. And let me know what you think about, you know, putting out an invitation to all these different folks and having just a big SRM meeting with a view to creating a united front and simultaneously communicating to the world, hey, world, you know, join us on the SRM mission. Right? Because we need people's support. We need to give them a community that they can join, right? And in parallel, we'll be doing the global holistic modeling and everything else to find the optimal mix. And let's not go in there with attachment that, no, my solution's better than yours. Let's lay down our arms already. Let's have like a ceasefire. Present a united front to the world, right? And then once we get the world in on the SRM thing, okay, then now we bring in everybody and say, okay, let's do objective, science-based, global holistic modeling and figure out the best mix of solutions. Anyway, let's do it. Time's running out, and this is, for me, the most urgent thing of all, because it's what brings us all together, what has the potential to. More soon. Love you all, and please let me know what you think. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Jackie. Love to hear from everyone. Let me know what you think.
Yeah, that's well done. Well done, Jim. You gonna send that right now? Are you gonna send that now, or are you gonna send it for Friday?
I'm going to send it now. And I just want to hear everyone's thoughts first. And if there's anything I should add, subtract, multiply, or divide.
Well, it would be nice to have other people present also, if you know, as maybe they would show up, you know, like you know what I mean?
Yeah, this doesn't have to be the last email I ever send to Guy, Pauline, and Ye. And it is urgent, and I think it's good enough to start, safe enough to try. Let's send it on. As more people show up, we'll give them updates. And who knows, maybe we'll get Guy, Ye, and Pauline on here. Any other input before I hit send?
Are you in touch with Dylan also? Is he in the loop?
Oh yeah, Bill and I play golf every Friday.
Dylan.
And then we go get some big steaks and milkshakes and stuff. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, no, Bill Gates couldn't be more out of the loop. He's freaking out of it. He's building a $500 million yacht.
I'm saying Dylan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we got to get Dylan back in. We got to get everybody back in here. What the hell? Anyway, but let me start with these guys. Any other points before I hit send? Uncle Frank, what do you think about all this? And Emery, I'm still getting feedback, so if you don't mind muting, that'd be super cool.
Jamin, I missed the part, or can you reread the part when it seems to me you were downplaying the engineering problems that are and why those two different groups may be debating back and forth. And I wouldn't poo-poo the fact that they do have to resolve a lot of questions before they can go ahead. That's what, can you read that part again?
Sure, sure. Let me screen share. And if you don't mind going on mute, Uncle Frank. Okay, great. Thanks. So I'm going to pause recording for a moment. Okay, after a little break. Welcome back, everyone. We are, I've just sent that email to Guy, Pauline, and Ye, and we'll eagerly await response. I'm going to assume everyone is here is familiar with Professor Guy McPherson's work, and if you're not, feel free to say so. But as I mentioned in the message to the two of them, Guy is the world's leading expert on the diagnosis of the problem, how severe it is, how quickly we are exponentially overheating, and you know, what a mess it will be and in what time frame. The time frame, unfortunately, is very, very soon, like in the next, you know, 12 to 24 months. I think we are on track for experiencing heating related catastrophes far bigger than what we've seen so far. That's just my prediction in the next couple of years. And, you know, Guy McPherson has identified no fewer than 67 self-reinforcing feedback loops driving this, you know, compound exponential of planetary overheating. And, you know, there's three phases to any exponential. There's the flat line, which is the beginning. Is it alive? There's the knee, and then there's the vertical, right? We're somewhere in the knee right now of exponential planetary overheating. Once we hit vertical, it's over. I mean, it's just over. That's the nature of these self-reinforcing feedback loops. SRM, I sometimes make the analogy that, like, you know, from Monty Python, that comedy show from the 70s and 80s. What a great show. There would all be all these people like singing and playing music, and then this giant Godzilla foot would just come down and squash them all. It would just take out like 100 people. What we need to counter this incredibly aggressive exponential driven by 67 self-reinforcing feedback loops, all pushing it up. We need a Monty Python-sized Godzilla foot to come down and stomp on that. And the only thing that can possibly do it is SRM, solar radiation management. It should be on the tips of everyone's tongue. It is literally the shield that's going to protect us from this asteroid that's hurtling towards the planet. That's how we need to think about this. And we need to deploy that shield like this summer, or at least portions of it. So, you know, the gist of my message to Guy, Pauline, and Ye, and ultimately to everyone, David Keith at Harvard, and all the others, both at Harvard and elsewhere, who've been looking at different parts of this. My message to all of us is that we need to come together and cooperate as a planetary, you know, community mission movement, and I'm not even worried about the naming right now, as I've addressed. Let's call it a, you know, a mission for starters. Can we come together centered around a planetary mission that really has two components at this point? One is communicating to the rest of the world the urgency of SRM, SRM as a whole, without getting, you know, too caught up in, you know, the details of which particular form of SRM, right? That's like, you know, I'm going to make a crazy analogy. The analogy is, let's say you're having a conversation. Let's say that person A is having a conversation with person B about suicide, and person A is, contemplating suicide. There are two topics that they could be discussing right now. One is whether or not to commit suicide, and the other topic is how to commit suicide if person A has determined that that's what he wants to do. I would say the really interesting topic is the first one, whether to commit suicide or not. How to do it is kind of, in the details. I feel exactly the same way about SRM. To not do SRM in time is suicide. So it's really the same conversation, suicide or not. Let's have that conversation first. Do we want to commit suicide? The best way to commit suicide is to not do SRM. Just stay on the course that we're on. It's a suicidal course, right? It's that scene in Rebel Without a Cause where the two teenagers are speeding towards the edge of the cliff in their respective cars, right? To continue on the present course means death. Obviously, one of the boys dies. James Dean does not, at least not then. He later dies in real life. But, there you have it. To stay on our present course is suicide. Just pedal to the metal, keep going towards the edge of the cliff, we're going down. So the real interesting conversation for me is to commit suicide by not doing SRM, or to save our lives by doing SRM. Can we have that as a planetary conversation? And it's all of our lives are involved. So everyone should be in the conversation. I don't care whether you have a bunch of tokens, whether gold or US dollar or Bitcoin or whatever. I don't care how many tokens you have or don't have. It's not about tokens, it's about life. Tokens are dead, life is alive. It's about the living coming together and having a conversation, a very open, very frank conversation about continuing down the path of omnicide versus slamming on the brakes with SRM. SRM is the brakes. Now, what kind of brakes? Well, we've got air brakes, we've got compression brakes, we've got hydraulic brakes, we've got wind brace brakes, we've got, a big, parachute we could erect. That's all fascinating. Headline, slam on the damn brakes already. Right? That's the headline. Right? That's the conversation humanity needs to be having right now. Are we down to continue on the omnicidal course, or do we need to slam on the brakes? And then, and then what I'm suggesting is that in parallel with the conversation about do we want to live or die, in parallel with that, we also need to do the modeling and analysis and development work to find the right mix of SRM solutions. So I'm going to make the analogy that it's a tale of two cities, New York and London. In London, you've got the underground laboratory of the MI6, unit, British Secret Service, and run by Q, and that's where Harvard scientists and others are cooking up all these different solutions, right? Okay, so that's the 007 Underground Laboratory. That's London. In New York, you've got Times Square, where we're conveying the message to the world on these gigantic screens and microphone and audio, and the world is listening, and the world is covering it, because New York is the world capital of news media, right? And let's throw in LA as well, so that we get entertainment, the world capital of entertainment media, thrown on top. So we got news media and entertainment media, and underground lab. And I'm saying we need to do the underground lab work, yes, and in parallel, we need to get this message out to the world and make it a conversation that the world's engaged in, lest it miss out on the opportunity to stay alive. And with that, I've spoken a whole ton, so I'm going to go on mute and just welcome whoever wants to jump in with questions, comments, requests to pause, whatever. We are recording. We're not live streaming yet. How do people feel about live streaming on Twitch? We generally do, but we don't have to. And I can also turn that off at pretty much any time. So anyway, not seeing any thumbs up for live streaming. Let's just keep recording. And I'm going to go on mute.
Hi, Jamie. I'm going to be back and forth because I'm like packing my bedroom. But what could you tell me what, and I don't know if I missed it, the initial email that was forwarded to you, what was that in response to?
Yeah, so Yatao reached out to David Keith and basically, you know, sent him a short video of what mirror reflection is, right? The ocean-based mirrors, the first one of the 6 that I mentioned. And so David Keith responded to that. David Keith is the atmosphere. He's the one who's funded by Bill Gates spraying shit into the atmosphere to cool the planet that way. And he's basically telling Yatao, you know, that I'm skeptical because I think what you're proposing will have significant environmental impacts. And spraying shit into the atmosphere won't, anyway. But he doesn't address that. But anyway, so, you know, he just takes a couple shots at Ye. And you know, and then Ye responds and says, you know, clarifies a bit more that actually he really does care about the environment, and he thinks his solution is the best overall. But you know, they're passing notes under the door when what needs to happen is a freaking conversation, right? Where we all get together with Guy McPherson, with Pauline, with us, with the ICE 9/11 folks, and with any other groups or communities or whatever, you know, fine, start it out, cap the initial meeting to 20 or whatever makes sense. Later we can have a bigger one. And ultimately we need to, you know, enfricate this out into a whole taxonomy of topics, right? I mean, there's so many topics that need to be addressed and mastered here if we're going to get this right and do it, right? And, you know, figuring out the right mix of engineering solutions, the right mix of SRM solutions, that's just the tip of the iceberg. What comes after that is the real challenging part, which is how do you sell that to the world? And what I'm saying is let's get both those trains out of the station right now in parallel, both moving forward because they both have their own trajectories. The underground MI6 lab has its own trajectory. And the sooner the better. Let's get it on and let's get that thing figured out. The other train, the other trajectory is the conversation with the world. The world needs to know that the house is on fire and that there are ways to put out the fire. And each of them is called SRM. There's just, you know, it's Snow White and the 7 Dwarves. The 7 Dwarves are the 7 little ways of implementing SRM. The Snow White is SRM. Saving Mother Earth, right? So while the little dwarves squabble between themselves as to which SRM solution is the best or which mix should make the cut or whatever, let's not forget Mother Earth. Let's not forget that we need to engage humanity and all of her children in on this conversation. For it to not do so is a huge disservice. Can you know, imagine the scenario where some of the children of a given mother are not informed that mother is on her deathbed? No, they all need to know, they all need to come, pay their respects, and do what they can to save her. SRM can save life on Earth, and it will save life on Earth, but only if we do it. How to do it? Well, I've outlined one Uber strategy for how to do it. Basically have 2 parallel developments. What's the optimal mix of SRM solutions and getting the world engaged in the conversation. Both need to happen right now, ASAP.
So,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Hey, you know, I just got an idea. Oh, no, go ahead, Emery. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I didn't want to really interrupt you. I just figured now was a great time, you know, because I had that idea, you know, and I can't get rid of it. It's in my head, and I don't. I'm trying to figure out like what would be. I know there would be obstacles. It's a challenging thing, but not any more challenging than what we're already proposing, you know. And I mean, it's a logistical issue for sure because of the distance between Antarctica and North and Antarctic, because basically the way I see it is that there's 14, like I put the information in the chat here. There's about 5.5 million square miles. Hold on, 14 million square kilometers in Antarctica, okay? And if the thickness of the ice is is 4,776 meters deep, okay? Multiply that by the square miles, right? That's a lot of square meters of ice that's below the surface.
It's dozens of millions of cubic kilometers.
Trillions.
Well, dozens of millions does not make trillions. So it's not even
Well,
billions, but it's dozens of, you know, it's over 100 million probably on the order of, or on that order. Maybe it's 50 million, maybe it's 100 million, but it's that many cubic kilometers. And that indeed is a lot of ice. So I think your idea of mining Antarctica for ice,
You know,
as long as we're not mining on one of those critical fissures that's just about to break off, you know, a whole chunk of Western Antarctica or something like that. Yeah, go ahead, Emery.
this is my point though, Jamin, is that it's the thickness. Look at the thickness on a graph, and we'll call that graph line time, okay? The more thick it is, the more time you have. And all we're doing really is we're bringing time up to the surface. I mean, we're giving ourselves more time. And at the same time, we're giving a cooling effect because we're spreading it out, okay? And we're covering, look at it as fertilizer. We're putting fertilizer onto the land, but the fertilizer is the ice that we need so desperately in the Arctic, because the Arctic is losing the ice, because the way the planet is, the tilt of the planet, okay? I don't know, there's something about our position and how I could be wrong, but there's something there because there's less ice at the North Pole, okay, than at the Antarctic. Now, there's a reason for that. So there's been some things happening. So my objective for this would be is to find a way to get the ice to the Arctic. Okay, we want to cool it off. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of depth at the Antarctic, so there's a lot of material there that we could bring up to the surface, and we lay it, we spread it over the cake. You know, it's gonna be the icing on the cake. We gotta spread it out.
You know, I love it, Emery. I think it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant, and I think there's definitely a place for it in the mix, because really the ice, mining the Antarctic ice, it's so freaking brilliant. Because mining that ice, getting it onto the oceans, right? It has two immediate massive impacts. One, it helps reflect sunlight back into space. Imagine we create just this massive system of barges and massive sails so that we carry these, astronomical quantities of ice in an environmental way.
Exactly. Now you're thinking. This is what the collective intelligence is. Look, that's and look, compare that to the fabrication of all these balls and these things that we would need for like mirrors and all the rest of it, right? And all of that, it's a big logistical process also. not any more than moving ice. We're talking about something that we're already good at mining, right? Now, we just have to transform that technology to mine ice. And we got plenty of vessels that go on the water. And if not enough, we built some more, And I don't know, this can be, I'm sure this could be figured out by bigger brains than me.
Well, the only bigger brain than yours, Emery, is the collective superintelligence, right? So forget about other individuals. It's all about the collective, and you're the inventor of this idea, as far as I'm concerned. I haven't heard anyone else suggest it. But the two major solutions, reflecting and then cooling the freaking ocean where it needs it the most, right? And because most of the heat that's absorbed on the planet is in the oceans. And, we've got the antidote. Of course, dumping land-based ice in the ocean is, of course, going to increase the sea level. But I think the bang for the buck in terms of cooling and reflectivity, my not even back of the envelope estimate, but just back of the brain estimate is that the sea level rise would actually be, we'd simply have to calculate it. But among the other benefits, here's the thing: if a whole chunk of Antarctica breaks off into the ocean because the ocean is too hot and it chips it away until it breaks off, wouldn't it have been? And then the sea levels rise 100 feet. Wouldn't it have been better to strategically and selectively mine ice from where it's not a sensitive structural area, have the sea level rise, I don't know, a couple inches because of that, but stop the 100-foot sea level rise? I think it would be a very, very wise horse trade to say, yes, we're going to dump enough ice into the ocean to raise the sea level, I don't know, a half an inch or an inch or whatever, but we're going to immediately deploy that to stop the melting of the portions of the land-based ice that are, or even, to stop the melting of the ice that could really, cause sea levels to spike if we broke off a bigger chunk. Anyway, the bottom line is we have to look at it holistically, right?
Look,
we can't just apply a single criterion to any proposed, solution or problem anymore. We need to, look at it holistically. Go ahead, Emery.
yeah, but remember, Gay had that we were having the conversation with Sarah. Okay, now she was going to the table. She was gonna get money, funding, and whatnot. Okay, and she was asking the question, well, how much land, how much ocean? Like, she was looking at ocean like land, right? And actually, I could see her point. It's one and the same. It's area that is under control of those terrible people. Either way, I see it as we need to know how much area is required, what percentage is that? What's the amount? Calculate. He was giving us the math, right? But what is let's try to visualize the size of that would make some impact. Okay, let's say it's the size of Australia, or whatever. Let's have a visual of that and say, okay, we're going to have to mine enough ice, okay, from the Antarctic that's going to represent that much square footage, okay, because we're going to use that to cover areas that require that reflectivity, and obviously there's going to be some melt. Some of it's going to melt, right? For sure. We're going to have some loss, but it's going to be a time sensitive operation, right? It's going to be a time-sensitive operation, and you know, gonna have to think about it more. You know, to see how we could do it. But it seems more viable to me somehow. You know.
You know, and I just thought of a way that we could offset the sea level rise from the ice by doing the following. And this is an idea that I came up with when I was a graduate student at MIT at the Parsons Laboratory, which is MIT's big hub for everything related to water, right? Whether it's water and climate, whether it's rivers, whether it's oceans, whether it's waves, whether it's evaporation, you name it, water, water, water. So I talked with my professors there about the possibility of using giant mechanical pumps powered by the wave action and the sea levels going up and down, right? Use that as a mechanism to pump water from the ocean up onto certain areas of dry land. Where would we want to put that salty seawater on dry land? Well, imagine, listen to this, imagine we dumped a bunch of it in the desert, say in the middle of the, you know, Arabian Peninsula or something like that. And we could model it all out. I did this kind of computer modeling of groundwater flows and whatnot when I was at Bechtel in San Francisco, the big engineering firm that actually built out much of the Saudi Arabian infrastructure, you know, oil refineries, whole cities. They've built out huge chunks of Australia. Take a look at the book Friends in High Places about the Bechtels. But anyway, I worked at Bechtel for a couple of summers when I was in college studying civil engineering. And anyway, so I know that extensive and very sophisticated and very accurate groundwater modeling is a thing, right? It exists. And so we could model the groundwater flows, we could model what's going to happen with that salt water. But the interesting thing is most of the water would evaporate. What would remain would be the salt. So that's why you dump it in some area where it's not going to hurt anyone or anything. Like the middle of the Arabian Peninsula, this is just like nothing. You know, it's just death and heat and no water. And dump it there, the water would evaporate, leaving the salt behind. That evaporated water will create clouds. Those clouds will reflect sunlight back into space and ultimately end up as pure rainfall somewhere else, right? And those are all good things. And in fact, we can recharge much of the dry areas of the world by strategically dumping salt water there, generating clouds, having it rain on areas that need the water. That can all be figured out with modeling and of course, experimentation. But with that, we offset any sea level rise. We could even more than offset it if we had to. But you see, this is the key to looking at it as a system, to looking at it holistically, right?
Get this, the ice is fresh. That would be drinkable water also. So we could look at that as a side benefit. Let's say that there is a certain loss from melting, right? Well, we could still capture that loss. It wouldn't be a loss because it could be used as drinking water or water used for agriculture, you know? And that could be brought up onto the land or whatever, bottled or barreled or whatever, you know? So there's an element there that there wouldn't be that much loss. And I mean, given the fact that we need water, where there's a shortage of water, there's a lot of pollution and things happening, and people are struggling to have water, and people are paying for water, you know? So there might be something else there, which, you know, those terrible people, okay, at the table, they would just love that. So they'd be willing to invest in bringing up some water, you know, bringing up some ice.
Yeah, no, the bottom line is, so I'm going to call yours solution number 7, right? Just so we keep the sequence of, and then any other solutions. Let's have solution number 8, 9, 10, whatever, let's get it on. One of the earlier solutions I came up with was suspending massive, thin film reflective sheets, which is the single cheapest way on a per square meter basis to get reflectivity of any kind. Yours might actually be cheaper, Emery, the floating ice solution, but that would have to be analyzed. But anyway, suspending these massive sheets in the air with blimps, with tethered blimps, right? Just, anyway. So another way was that we speculated on was creating like a network of floating towers in the oceans that are also tethered through anchors and either even tethered to each other, but a network of towers which could then support these massive sheets of thin film reflective material. And if a storm were to come along, you would retract them, roll it up like a retractable blind, right, on a window. So anyway, so let's call those let's call the blimp one number 8 and the tower based one number 9. Those are both for thin film. Well, the blimp one could be deployed over land or ocean, and but number 9 would be ocean based. Okay, see, this is what we're talking about. Pardon me?
Got another question for you.
Yes, Emery.
As you go higher into the atmosphere, okay, it gets colder, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
how much colder does it get? Like
Quite a bit.
quite a bit colder?
Yeah.
Now, okay. So, I mean, this is out there also. This is another out there idea, and that is to have some kind of a technology, some kind of a way of bringing that cold air down closer to the surface, to bring it below the greenhouse effect. Okay, the greenhouse effect is, that's a problem. So we want to bring the cold air past the greenhouse canopy. There's a canopy which needs to be broken, and we got to bring that cold air somehow back towards the surface of the planet. Now, I mean, that's another way out there idea, but I'm just saying we're looking at things that cool down, but it has to be something also that can be regulated. Apparently, you have to have some kind of control also in whatever is done. It has to be tunable. So, but there's an idea there.
Yeah, really good stuff. I'm just making a list. Of all the different ways that we've been discussing.
I think mining for ice. I mean, it's such a crazy idea. Who would have ever thought of mining for ice? I think that one has legs, for sure.
Yeah, especially when used in conjunction with the others.
course, in the Antarctic, you're looking at harsh environmental conditions to work under. So that's a challenge in itself. But, you know, where there's a will, there's a way, I'm sure.
You know, it's interesting. A friend of the family, I was just thinking about this the other day, or maybe it was even yesterday, but a friend of the family, decades ago, an electrical engineer, took a job for 1 year in Antarctica at the very South Pole, doing a bunch of, you know, measurements and whatnot, and got paid a lot of money for it. But you know, lived at the South Pole for a year. So there are people who do projects down there all the way to the South Pole, North Pole, as we all know. So it's simply a matter of committing the investment to it and building out the infrastructure to make it happen, designing and building the machinery, you know, to withstand all those conditions of extreme cold, extreme wind, salt, you know, a pretty harsh set of conditions. But, you know, we're pretty darn good at engineering at this point. Maybe a bit too good, some might say, but we're certainly good at mastering these big. I mean, look, if we can put a whole spacecraft on the moon and return it home, I mean, come on, we're really good at engineering. So
Yeah,
let's engineer the system.
and Guy says we're very clever.
Yes, we're very clever, but can we be wise enough to actually come together and sort this out together as a collective intelligence?
By the way, my little penguin friend there, kind of like Guy. I don't know if you saw the weight clip thing I did. Did you see the email I sent you?
Yeah, I saw the email, but I didn't actually click on the thing because I thought you said that part of it was unavailable because I took down a certain video.
Yeah,
Let me
yeah.
let me pause.